Billionaire threw 30 dead engines at a single dad's door. He turned every one into a sale. 31 engines. That was the count. 31 cast iron blocks, cracked heads, seized pistons, and stripped crankcases, dropped by flatbed onto the gravel driveway of a man whose landlord had already left 2 late notices under the door, and whose daughter had been eating the same brand of store-brand macaroni 4 nights, running, because it was the only thing still marked down at the corner store 2 blocks over. 31 engines that Harlan Cross, founder of Cross Automotive Holdings, owner of 14 dealerships across 3 states, a man who wore a watch that cost more than most people's first cars, had declared completely, irreparably, terminally dead. His flagship shop mechanics had agreed. The regional service manager had agreed. 2 independent consultants flown in from Atlanta had agreed. Every one of those engines, by every qualified assessment, was scrap. Total write-off. Not worth the floor space. And then Harlan Cross had them loaded onto 2 flatbeds and delivered to the wrong man's house. The little girl standing behind her father in the doorway was 5 years old. She was holding a stuffed rabbit, soft gray, 1 button eye missing it so long she didn't notice anymore, named Biscuit. She looked at all those engines the way children sometimes look at things too large to understand, but somehow too important to look away from. Her father stood very still for a moment. He did not look alarmed. He did not look impressed. He looked at those 31 dead engines the way a certain kind of doctor looks at a full waiting room, not with dread, but with a quiet and unhurried attention. Stay with this one. It earns every minute. His name was Mason Eld, 32 years old, single father for the last 18 months. He worked mornings at the muffler shop on Garrett Street, not as the manager, not as the lead tech, just as the man who showed up first and left last, and never once called in sick. His hands were calloused from the knuckles to the wrists in the particular way that comes not from one kind of work, but from decades of accumulated work, all of it with tools, all of it close to the ground. His jacket was a faded green canvas work coat that had belonged to his father before him. The name Roy was still stitched above the left pocket in yellow thread, going soft at the edges. He had never had it changed. It seemed, somehow, like it still applied. His daughter was Lily, 5 years old and 4 months past her birthday, with her mother's serious brown eyes and a habit of asking exactly the right question at exactly the wrong moment. She brought Biscuit everywhere, to the grocery store, to the muffler shop on the 2 mornings a month when the daycare ran short-staffed and he had no other option, to the parking lot of the elementary school at 6:40 in the morning when he had to sign the early drop-off forms in the dark with a pen that was half dead itself. Biscuit had been sewn back together twice, once by Mason, once by Lily herself, with thread that didn't match, and one ear had come out slightly longer than the other from the first repair. Lily didn't mind. She said it just meant Biscuit heard better on that side. Mason's wife, Dara, had died 18 months earlier. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone could have anticipated or argued with. A blood clot undetected, swift, quietly catastrophic. She had been 30 years old. She had been, according to every person who had known her, the organized one. The one who kept the tax forms in alphabetical order, who had the pediatrician's after-hours number memorized, who could read a room in under 10 seconds and understand what it needed. Mason had loved her the way quiet people love, not loudly, not with declarations, but with a consistency that meant you never had to wonder. After she was gone, he kept a sketchbook of hers in the drawer beside the kitchen sink. He did not open it often. He opened it when he needed to remember what her handwriting looked like, which was more often than he would have told anyone. The sketchbook stayed in the drawer. The drawer stayed closed most mornings. Most mornings was enough. The day the flatbeds showed up, Mason had been awake since 4:45. Lily had a cough that week. Nothing serious, the pediatrician had said on Tuesday. Just a virus running its course, but persistent enough to wake her in the night. And when she woke, he woke. And when he woke, he did not go back to sleep. He got up, made coffee, checked on her. Found her breathing fine, Biscuit tucked under her chin the way it always was, and stood in her doorway for a long moment before going back to the kitchen. By the time the trucks rattled down his street at 7:12 in the morning, he had been awake for over 2 hours and was standing at the front window, watching them slow. He went outside. The driver of the first truck was on his phone. He climbed down eventually with a clipboard and the look of a man who had been given instructions he was not going to question because the money was right. "Mason Eld?" the driver said. Mason said he was. "Delivery from Cross Automotive Holdings." Mason looked at the first flatbed, looked at the second one pulling up behind it, looked back at the driver. "Nobody called ahead," Mason said. The driver flipped a page. "Order says no authorization required. Drop and go." "One." He paused. "There's a note." The note was handwritten on a folded piece of paper, not printed, not typed, just handwriting on plain paper. The letters large and downward slanting, pressed hard enough to leave a ghost on the back of the sheet. It read, "These are 30 engines from the Waverly lot. Every tech I employ says they're finished. You apparently told my shop foreman, and I am quoting here, that nothing is finished until I look at it. Consider this your opportunity to prove it. H.C." Mason folded the note, put it in his jacket pocket next to the stitched name. "All right," he said. "You want them just left in the driveway? Stack them along the fence. Leave a clear path to the front door." The driver looked at 31 engines, looked at the driveway. "That's going to take a while." "Coffee's on if you want it," Mason said. He turned and went back inside. Lily was at the kitchen table in her pajamas, biscuit propped against the orange juice carton, watching the trucks through the window with her serious brown eyes. "What are those?" she said. "Engines," Mason said. "Broken ones?" "People think so." She looked at Biscuit. Biscuit's one good eye faced the window. "Are you going to fix them?" "I'm going to look at them," Mason said. First, she seemed to find this satisfying. She asked if there was more orange juice. He checked. There was. The name Harlan Cross was not one Mason had grown up hearing, because growing up, Mason had lived in a part of the county where people drove vehicles with 200,000 miles on them and fixed them in their own driveways when they broke and left them on the lawn when they couldn't. He had first seen the name on a dealership sign when he was 23, doing a 6-month contract job at a fleet maintenance center outside the city. By then, Cross Automotive Holdings had 7 locations. Harlan Cross was 49, broad-shouldered, and self-made in the way that some men are, not that the connections weren't there, but the money had genuinely been built. What Mason had heard about him from the foreman at the Garrett Street shop who'd done service work for the Waverly lot was this: Cross did not revisit decisions. When he declared something a loss, it was a loss. When his techs wrote off a component, it stayed written off. The policy had been efficient for 20 years and had cost him, without his knowing, something considerable. It was going to cost him more before the end. The first engine Mason pulled from the stack along his fence was a 5.3-liter V8 from a 2014 fleet truck, high mileage, seized number 4 cylinder, failed head gasket, coolant contamination in the oil. 2 mechanics and 1 consultant had called it a total loss. The bore was scored. The piston had fused to the wall. By any reasonable standard, you machined it down for parts and moved on. Mason brought it into the side garage he rented from his neighbor, Mr. Osei, for $80 a month. The garage had 1 overhead light, a concrete floor with a long oil stain in the middle, and enough room for 1 engine stand and 1 person moving carefully. He had been using the space for 8 months, small jobs, weekend work, the occasional thing someone on the street brought him because the shop wanted more than they could pay. He got to work at 9 in the morning. Lily was at daycare. He had until 3:45. He worked without hurrying. He did not explain himself as he worked because there was no one to explain himself to. He disassembled the head. He examined the bore with a flashlight and then without one, running his finger along the scoring the way a person reads Braille slowly, with attention. He found what the scoring was hiding. It was not what it appeared to be. At 11:51 in the morning, the engine started. Not clean, not perfect, not yet. But it started and it idled. and Mason stood with his hands at his sides and listened to it for 43 seconds. Then he shut it off. He opened the small notebook he had bought from the drugstore 2 days earlier, green cover. Narrow ruled and wrote the engine's serial number at the top of the first page. Below it, he wrote the failure mode. Below that, the correction. Below that, the materials cost. He looked at the number, $61. He did not call anyone. He went inside and made a sandwich. He was back in the garage by 1 o'clock. Engine 2 was a 3.5-liter V6, high compression, from a luxury sports division's lease return fleet. The failure here was different, not seized, but starved. An oil pressure collapse that had run the bearings dry over too many short cold start cycles, the kind of failure that accumulates quietly until suddenly it doesn't. The two consultants had written thermal damage across the assessment sheet and left it at that. Mason turned it in his hands for a long while before he put it on the stand. He did not rush. Rushing was for emergencies. This was not an emergency. This was a problem, and problems required attention, not speed. Dara had told him that once. She had been talking about something else, entirely a disagreement with her sister. Something small that had escalated, but the principle had the same shape. You cannot solve anything by moving through it faster than you can see. He had thought about that a lot these last 18 months. Moving through things faster than you can see. It described a certain kind of grief. He had tried not to do it that way. By the end of his first full week in the garage, 7 engines were lined against the back wall, labeled in his handwriting, ready for delivery. 7 engines that 3 different professionals had certified as finished, not repaired to where they had started. Corrected past where they had started because Mason, moving slowly through each failure record, had found the original design errors underneath the breakdown and fixed those too. Mr. Osei, his neighbor and landlord, came by on Thursday evening. He was 68, originally from Accra, with a way of watching things without appearing to watch them. He stood in the garage doorway and looked at the row of 7 engines against the wall. He did not ask any questions for a long time. "How long will this take you?" he said finally. 3 weeks, Mason said. "Give or take." Osei nodded. He looked at the green notebook on the workbench. "You told the muffler shop?" "Took leave." Osei was quiet again. "Lily doing all right?" "She's good," Mason said. Coughs cleared up. Osei looked at the engines, at the workbench. At the drawing taped to the wall, Lily had put it there the previous Saturday. The circles and the happy face and Dad's work in purple crayon. He looked at it for a moment. "My father was a mechanic," Osei said. "I know," Mason said. "He used to say, a broken engine is like a person who's been misunderstood." Osei smiled slightly, the way he smiled when he was repeating something that still held value. He said the job wasn't to fix them. The job was to understand what happened to them. The fixing came from that. Mason didn't say anything. Osei looked at the engines one more time, then turned and walked back toward his house. The evening was settling around the street in a warm, ordinary way. And somewhere inside his house, Lily was eating dinner with Priya, and Biscuit was on the kitchen table, being fed imaginary food from an imaginary plate, and the green notebook had 23 more pages left in it. By end of the second week, Mason had 19 engines returned to running condition. He had developed a rhythm, up at 5:15, breakfast with Lily, who ate toast and juice and gave Biscuit a portion of toast she held at the table's edge while explaining to him the importance of nutrition. Drop off at 7:30, garage by 8, work until 2:30, pick up at 3:45, dinner, bath, story, Biscuit on the pillow, lights out. The rhythm was not glamorous, nothing about it was, but it had the particular steadiness that Mason had learned to value above almost everything else since Dara died, the knowledge that tomorrow would look like today, that Lily knew what to expect, that the floor of their life was solid even if the ceiling was low. He could raise the ceiling in time. He could not replace a floor that collapsed under a child's feet. He was thinking about this in the inexact way he thought about most things, not with words, but with a kind of settled attention when his phone rang on a Monday morning at 6:54. The name of Cross Automotive's CFO was Renata Cho. She had been with the company for 9 years, was 41, and had a gift for numbers that was so complete and so automatic that people who didn't understand it sometimes mistook it for coldness. She was not cold. She was precise. These are not the same thing, though they can appear identical from a distance. In the quarterly review meeting, Renata had set a number on the screen and waited while Harlan Cross looked at it. The Waverly write-offs alone, she said, represent approximately $240,000 in potential salvage revenue classified as unretrievable. My techs classified them, Cross said. Your techs classified them. I'm not disputing the assessments. I'm flagging the methodology. The vice president of operations, a man named Cameron Dole, had been in the room. 46 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in the way that signals not just money, but careful investment in the appearance of authority. He had been with Cross Automotive for 11 years and had, over those 11 years, built something subtle and effective, a layer between Harlan Cross and the information that reached him. Not a filter, exactly. More of a translation service that occasionally changed the meaning without changing the words. After the meeting, it was Cameron Dole who suggested the engine experiment. Not because he expected it to produce anything useful, because he knew who Mason Eld was. He had known for 3 months, ever since a single-day contract worker had walked into the Waverly lot, spent 6 hours there, and identified a recurring calibration error in the shop's diagnostic equipment that had been producing false failure readings on a specific model year of transmission controller. The shop foreman had reported it to Dole directly. Dole had thanked him. 3 weeks later, a report had appeared at the operations meeting submitted under the name of a consulting firm that Dole had a standing relationship with, billed at $4,800, which contained, in 2 key sections, language drawn almost verbatim from the shop foreman's summary of what the contract worker had found. The contract worker's name was not mentioned anywhere in the report. His name was Mason Eld. Mason did not know about the report. He was not the kind of man who tracked what happened after he left a room. He had fixed the thing he had been asked to fix. He had told the foreman what he found. He had driven home and made dinner for Lily, and put Biscuit on her pillow and read her a story and gone to sleep. He did not know that Cameron Dole had, in the database of a professional services network, found a partial record of Mason Eld's employment history and had chosen, deliberately, not to follow up on it. He did not know what Cameron Dole had seen in that record and chosen to leave alone. He did not know, and it would not have mattered to him if he had. He was not in the habit of caring what people thought he was capable of. He was in the habit of showing them. By the end of the first week, Mason had returned 7 engines to operating condition, not repaired to factory spec. In 3 cases, better than factory spec, he had identified and corrected original manufacturing tolerances that were built to fail under extended use, the kind of failure that was slow enough to look like normal wear until it wasn't. He had written each correction in the green notebook, with the serial number at the top and the materials cost at the bottom. He took Lily to the park on Sunday. She brought Biscuit. They sat on a bench while she worked through a bag of pretzels and told him with great seriousness about a disagreement at daycare involving a red crayon. He listened to the whole story. It had 3 acts and a resolution. "Did you sort it out?" he said. "We shared," she said. "That's good." "It was my crayon," she said, "but it was fine." He didn't say anything. She leaned against his arm and fed Biscuit a pretzel, resting the soft gray rabbit on her knee with the one long ear and the one short ear and the single button eye facing the afternoon. On Monday morning, he was in the garage by 6. He had 11 engines left to assess. There was a name that Priya, the neighbor's 16-year-old daughter, who had started coming over some evenings to watch him work, had asked about. She sat on an overturned bucket near the door one Tuesday evening and asked how he knew, just by looking, what was wrong. Mason set down the wrench he was holding, thought about it for a moment. "You listen," he said. "Not with your ears. You pay attention to what the thing is telling you about itself. Everything that fails leaves a record of how it failed. The job is reading the record." Priya looked at the engine on the stand. "Did you learn that at school?" "Some of it," Mason said. "Most of it was time." What Priya didn't know, what most people who knew Mason L. didn't know, and what Cameron Dole had found a trace of and buried, was what Mason had been doing for the 4 years before the muffler shop on Garrett Street. Before the late notices, before the green canvas jacket with Roy stitched above the pocket. 4 years. Virginia. A military contractor running a program to rebuild and reclassify salvage-grade mechanical components for redeployment. Mason had been the lead systems architect, not a technician, not a supervisor. The architect of the methodology itself, the classification system, the recovery protocols, the training framework for the technicians who worked under him. His team's recovery rate on components that 2 independent acquisition assessments had written off as non-viable was 68%. 68% of things everyone said were dead, working again. He had left when Dara got sick. She had not asked him to. He had made the calculation the way he made all calculations, without ceremony, without drama, and decided that Lily needed one parent completely present more than the country needed his recovery rate. He had submitted his resignation on a Tuesday morning. He was home by noon. The program director had called 6 times over the following month. Mason had taken 2 of the calls. He had thanked the man sincerely and said he would not be returning. He did not explain further. He did not have to. Nobody at the muffler shop knew this. Nobody at Cross Automotive knew this. Cameron Dole had seen a partial entry in a professional database employer listed as a defense contractor, title obscured under a security classification, dates showing a 4-year gap before the Garrett Street shop, and had made a calculation of his own. He had decided that knowing more was more dangerous than not knowing. He had been wrong. He had been wrong in the particular way that people are wrong when they confuse the absence of information with the absence of consequence. The consequence arrived on a Monday morning at 6:54. Mason's phone rang in the garage. Corporate Exchange. Area code he recognized. He answered. "Mr. Eld, my name is Renata Cho. I'm the CFO at Cross Automotive Holdings. I'd like to come and see what you're doing." Mason looked at the engine on the stand. The 24th notebook page was open in front of him. "When?" he said. "Today," she said. "If possible." "Come at 10, he said. He arrived at 10:13, alone. Gray suit. Precise in the way her numbers were precise. She walked down the driveway past the recovered engines stacked against the fence and through them the way a navigator walks a chart reading as she moved, calculating. Mason met her at the garage door. He showed her the notebook from the first page. He walked her through each entry, the serial number, the failure mode, the correction, the materials cost, the time. He let her read at her own pace. He did not fill the silence. She moved through the notebook page by page. She did not react. She did not nod or hum or make any of the small sounds that people make to show they are engaged. She simply read. The only motion was her finger turning each page. When she reached page 11, she stopped. "This one," she said. "The corrected tolerance on the number 2 main bearing journal. This isn't in the OEM specification." "The OEM specification is wrong," Mason said. "Has been since the design was approved. The tolerance allows thermal expansion up to a threshold that produces microfissures in the bearing surface under cold start, high load conditions. The correction shifts the tolerance by 0.004. That's all it takes." Renata looked at the page. "This would apply across the whole model run, across about 6 years of production," Mason said. "Roughly 40,000 units in the fleet market. If Cross Automotive has been writing off engines in that year range for premature bearing failure, the write-off assessment has been correct about the symptom and wrong about the cause." Renata closed the notebook slowly, set it down, straightened it. "How long have you known this?" she said. "Since the 3rd engine on this stack," Mason said. Week 1. She was quiet for a long time after that. Total materials cost, she said, $1,412 across 23 units. Projected recovery value on those 23. Retail rebuilt, you're looking at 90 to 95,000. Fleet wholesale, call it 68. She set the notebook down on the workbench and straightened it so it was parallel to the edge. Looked at it for a moment. Mr. Eld, she said, were you the person who identified the transmission controller calibration error at our Waverly location in March? Mason said he was. Was that finding transmitted through official channels? Not by me, he said. I told the shop foreman. What he did with it isn't something I know. Renata looked at the notebook. Looked at the 23 recovered engines lined along the back wall. Not the quiet of nothing happening, the quiet of a room where every number has just come into alignment. I need to make a call, she said. There's coffee, Mason said. If you want. She made the call from the driveway. 11 minutes. Her voice did not rise once. Harlan Cross arrived at 12:40. He came in a car that was newer than Mason's garage, had years on it. He was 61, broad, with the particular physical authority that in some men is all posture and in some men is just bone. He walked past the engines along the fence slowly. He counted them. He went into the garage and stood at the door for a moment, taking in the space, the single overhead light, the oil-stained floor, the engine on the stand, the workbench with the green notebook and the manila folder and Lily's crayon drawing of an engine taped to the wall above. He went to the workbench. He read the notebook from the first page. He turned each page at his own pace, without asking any questions, without looking up. On page 11, he stopped and read the entry twice. He did not say anything about it. He turned the page. When he finished, he set the notebook down and stood for a moment with his hands flat on the workbench. He looked at Lily's drawing, the circles, the happy face. Dad's work in purple crayon, the letters slightly uneven, the D a little larger than the rest. How old is she? He said. 5, Mason said. Cross nodded, looked back at the notebook. You were going to call me when you finished? He said. When I had something worth calling about? Mason said. How many left? 8. Possibly 7. One of them is genuinely done. Bore damage is too deep to correct without a full re-sleeve, and the economics don't work at that point. I'll give you a written note on it explaining the actual failure mode. Your techs will recognize it faster next time. Cross nodded slowly. He looked at the wall above the workbench, where Lily's drawing was taped circles, a happy face, the words Dad's work written in purple crayon. He looked at it for a moment without comment. I need to understand what happened with the calibration report, he said. I don't know anything about a report, Mason said. I told your foreman what I found. I was paid my day rate, and I went home. That's the whole of it from my side. Cross looked at Renata, who was standing near the door with the stillness of someone who has been holding something carefully and is now deciding when to set it down. She set the manila folder on the workbench. She had spent the weekend with direct database access, working through an archive that wasn't visible on the standard operations dashboard. It had taken her 4 hours to find the folder. It had taken her another 2 to confirm what she was looking at. The folder held an email chain 6 messages, beginning with Mason Eld's conversation with the Waverly shop foreman in March, ending with the foreman's message to Cameron Dole. This guy knows what he's doing. You might want to think about bringing him on properly. And below it, Dole's reply. Noted. Closed. 3 weeks later, the consulting firm report had appeared at the operations meeting. The firm had billed Cross Automotive Holdings $4,800. The report contained, in 2 key sections, language drawn almost word for word from the foreman's summary of what Mason Eld had identified. The consulting firm had a referral arrangement with Cameron Dole, undisclosed in any company filing, that paid Dole a percentage of billed engagements. Renata had printed it all: the email chain, the consulting report, the billing records, the referral arrangement documentation, everything in order, everything labeled, everything dated. Cross read through it. He did not speak while he read. He turned each page the way he had turned each page of the green notebook without rushing, without letting the weight of it show. He looked at Lily's drawing on the wall, circles and a happy face. Dad's work. He looked at Mason. I owe you an apology, he said. You relied on your team's information, Mason said. I also had your finding, transmitted through my VP, and I let it be buried because I built a structure that could be used against me. Cross's voice was even, not cold, measured. That structure is my responsibility. The man who exploited it is his own responsibility, but the structure is mine. He paused. I'd like to offer you a position. Propulsion and recovery systems lead across all 14 locations. You'd develop the methodology. You'd set the classification standards. You'd train the techs. He stopped, waited. Mason was quiet for a moment. I have a daughter, he said. She's 5. Daycare opens at 7:30. I drop her off. I pick her up at 3:45. I don't take weekend work unless something is genuinely urgent. Done, Cross said. I want it in writing that any methodology I develop is attributed to me. I'm not interested in having my name removed from my own work a second time. Cross looked at Renata. Renata had a legal pad already open. She nodded once. I'll have language drafted by tomorrow morning, she said. Cross looked back at Mason. One more thing, he said. 30 out of 31 is not a failure. That's the best recovery rate I've seen from any source, internal or external. I want that in the contract too. Mason looked at the notebook on the workbench, at the 23 pages of careful, unhurried handwriting, at the engines lined against the back wall. I still have 8 to finish, he said. Let me finish them first. The meeting at the Waverly location was at 3 o'clock that afternoon. Renata had scheduled it. The same conference room where the quarterly review had been held, the same room where Cameron Dole had presented his findings, and the number on the screen had made everyone quiet. He was there when they arrived, his laptop open, his good jacket on, his posture exactly as composed as it always was. He did not know what the meeting was about. He had been told it was a follow-up to the quarterly review. He had prepared talking points. Renata set the manila folder on the table. She opened it. She walked through each document in order. The email chain, the consulting report, the billing records, the undisclosed referral arrangement. She did not editorialize. She read the documents and let them make their own case. Her voice was the same voice she used for quarterly reviews. Precise, without adverb. Dole was quiet through the first 3 items. On the 4th, he began to speak. Cross looked at him once. Not with anger, not with contempt, with the particular flatness of a man who has already done the accounting and found the number. Dole did not finish his sentence. When Renata closed the folder, the room was still for a moment. Your resignation, Cross said, in writing, by end of business today. Legal will contact you separately regarding the referral arrangement. I would strongly suggest you have representation. Cameron Dole looked at the table. He looked at the folder. He looked at Cross with the expression of a man who had spent 11 years believing that managing the flow of information was the same as managing events, and has just discovered the difference between those two things. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He walked out. The door closed. Renata looked at Cross. I'll coordinate with legal, she said. I know, Cross said. He left the room alone, walked through the service floor, stopped at the first open bay and looked at the diagnostic equipment, the calibration terminal, that had been producing false failure readings for 2 years. On a model year, none of his techs had flagged. He stood there for a moment. He thought about a man in a narrow garage on $80 a month of rented floor space, reading engine failures the way other people read text, correcting things no one else had tried to correct. He called Mason from the parking lot. Mason picked up on the second ring. How many did you finish? Cross said. 7. The 8th is the one I mentioned, genuinely done. Bore damage too extensive. I left a written note on the workbench explaining the failure mode. Photograph it and send it to your lead techs. They'll recognize it faster going forward. There was a pause. 30 out of 31, Cross said. 30 out of 31, Mason said. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Not the quiet of awkwardness, the quiet of something that has concluded correctly. Bring your daughter to the company family event on Saturday, Cross said. Lot of food, kids, no work attached to it. I'll ask her, Mason said. He knew what she would say. He knew it the way he knew most things about Lily, not because she was predictable, but because she was honest in the way children are honest, when they haven't yet learned that honesty requires preparation. He found out at dinner. Mac and cheese her preference, his concession, the shared economy of a household that had learned to be small without being diminished. Biscuit was propped against the salt shaker with both ears forward, one long and one short, the single button eye bright under the kitchen light. Mason told her about the invitation, the event, the food, the other kids. She thought about it for a long moment, picked up Biscuit, set him down again. Daddy, she said, did you fix all the engines? 30 out of 31, he said. She nodded, looked at Biscuit, looked back at him. 30 is a lot, she said. That's more than my whole class. He looked at her. Yeah, he said. It is. She went back to her dinner. Outside, through the kitchen window, the evening light was going long and orange across the empty driveway where 31 engines had sat 3 weeks before. The gravel was settling back into itself. The fence was just a fence again. The note with H.C. Lee's downward slanting handwriting was still in his jacket pocket, next to Roy's faded stitching, folded the same way he had folded it on the driveway that first morning. He got up to do the dishes. Lily carried Biscuit to the couch and tucked him carefully against the armrest, so he was facing the kitchen, facing Mason at the sink, facing the window, facing whatever came after this, the same way he always had, one eye open, one ear longer than the other, held together with mismatched thread, still looking.